Welcome back.
Welcome.
We're gonna
to this
pick up
spooky room.
after we left off, and hopefully we can finish it up today.
We should get it done today.
Yeah, I'm hoping.
The sudden entrance of his prosaic uncle into the world of wizardry and horror that haunted him without interruption, now for 2 days and 2 nights, had the immediate effect of giving to the affair of an entirely new aspect. The sound of that crisp "Hulloa, my boy, and what's up now?" and the grasp of that dry and vigorous hand introduced another standard of judgment. A revulsion of feeling washed through a revulsion of feeling washed through him. He realized that he had let himself go rather badly. He even felt vaguely ashamed of himself. The native hard-headedness of his race reclaimed him.
Damn. And this doubtless explains why he found it so hard to tell that group round the fire everything. He told enough. However, for the immediate decision to be arrived at that a relief party must start at the earliest possible moment, and that Simpson, in order to guide it capably,
Yep.
yeah, in order to guide it capably, must first have food and above all sleep. Dr. Cathcart, observing the lad's condition more shrewdly than his patient knew, gave him a very slight injection of morphine. For 6 hours he slept like the dead.
Damn. Put that boy
Damn.
under. From the description, carefully written out afterwards by the student of divinity, it appears that the account he gave to the astonished group omitted sundry vital and important details. He declares that, with his uncle's wholesome, matter-of-fact countenance staring him in the face, he simply had not the courage to mention them. Thus, all the search party gathered. It would seem, it would seem, was that Dafago had suffered in the night an acute, inexplicable attack of mania, had imagined himself called by someone or something, and had plunged into the bush after it without food or rifle, where he must die a horrible and lingering death by cold and starvation, unless he could be found and rescued in time. In time, moreover, meant at once.
Maybe that's not morphine kicking in, bro.
God, on God, bro.
How do okay? Also, how do they have access to morphine? Well,
I think one of them's a doctor. Like,
oh,
they
okay.
have their doctor guy, their guide, uh, the new guy, and I think the brown guy. I don't
Well,
know.
oh, I guess they did say Dr. Cathcart. So,
Yeah, that's true. Doctor Cascade.
in the course of the following day, however, they were off by 7, leaving Punk in the charge with instructions to have food and fire always ready. Simpson found it possible to tell his uncle a good deal more of the story's true unword,
Inwardness.
inwardness,
Yes.
inwardness without diving that it was drawn out of him. As a matter of fact, by a very subtle form of cross examination, by the time they reached the beginning of the trail, where the canoe was laid up against the return journey, he had mentioned how Defago spoke vaguely of something he called a Wendigo, how he cried in his sleep, how he imagined an unusual scent about the camp, and had betrayed other symptoms of mental excitement. He also admitted the bewildering effect of that extraordinary odor upon himself, pungent and acrid, like the
Accurate.
odor. Shut up. Acrid, like the odor of lions. And by the time they were within an easy hour of 50 island water, he had let slip the further fact, a foolish avowal of his own hysterical condition, as he felt afterwards that he had heard and the vanished guide call for help. He omitted the signature phrases used for the simply could not bring himself to repeat the preposterous language. Also, while describing how the man's footsteps in the snow had gradually assumed an exact miniature?
Miniature. Yeah.
Yeah, an exact miniature likeness of the animal's plunging tracks. He left out the fact that they measured a wholly incredible distance. It seemed a question, nicely balanced between individual pride and honesty. What he should reveal and what suppress
Yep.
yeah, suppress what suppress he mentioned the fiery tinge in the snow. For instance, yet shrank from telling that body and bed had been partly dragged out of the tent.
Damn.
God damn, bro.
With the net result that Dr. Cathcart, adroit psychologist that he fancied himself to be, had assured him clearly enough exactly where his mind, influenced by loneliness, bewilderment, and terror, had yielded to the strain and invited delusion. While praising his conduct, he managed at the same time to point out where, when, and how his mind had gone astray. He made his nephew think himself finer than he was by beauteous praise, yet more foolish than he was by minimizing the value of the evidence. Like many another materialist, that is, he lied cleverly on the basis of insufficient knowledge, because the knowledge supplied seemed to his own particular intelligence inadmissible.
The spell of these terrible solitudes, he said, cannot leave any mind untouched, any mind that is possessed of the higher imaginative qualities. It has worked upon yours exactly as it worked upon my own when I was your age. The animal that haunted your little camp was undoubtedly a moose, for the belling of a moose may have. Hang on.
Belling.
For the belling of a moose may have sometimes a very particular quality of sound. The colored appearance of the big tracks was obviously a defect of vision in your own eyes, produced by excitement. The size and the stretch of the tracks we shall prove when we come to them. Well, wouldn't they be covered by snow?
I feel like they would be, yeah.
But the hallucination of an audible voice, of course, is one of the commonest forms of delusion. Due to the mental excitement, and excitement, my dear boy, perfectly excusable, and let me add, wonderfully controlled by under the circumstances for the rest. I am bound to say you have acted with a splendid courage, for the terror of feeling on oneself lost in this wilderness is nothing short of awful. And had I been in your place, I don't for a moment believe I could have behaved with 1/4 of your wisdom and decision. The only thing I find it uncommonly difficult to explain is that damned odor.
It made me feel sick, I assure you, declared his nephew. Positively dizzy. His uncle's attitude of calm omniscience, merely because he knew more psychology formulae, made him slightly defiant. It was so easy to be wise in the explanation of an experience one has not personally witnessed. A kind of a kind of desolate and terrible odor is the only way I can describe it, he concluded, glancing at the features of the quiet, unemotional man beside him.
I can only marvel, was the reply, that under the circumstances I did not seem to you even worse. The dry words Simpson knew hovered between the truth and his uncle's interpretation of the truth.
And so, at last they came to the little camp, and found the tent still standing, the remains of the fire, and the piece of paper pinned to a stake beside it, untouched. The cache, poorly contrived by inexperienced hands, however, had been discovered and opened by muskrats, mink, and squirrel. The matches lay scattered about the open, but the food had been taken to the last crumb.
Damn, what a hungry
Got
bitch.
robbed, bro.
Well, fellers, he ain't here, exclaimed Hank loudly after his fashion. And that's a sartain?
As Sartain.
As certain? And that's as certain as the coal supply down below. But where he's got to buy. Oh my god. But where he's got to buy this time is. Jesus Christ. What is. Hang on. I'm gonna.
I got.
Okay. You do that.
But okay, let me restart.
Yeah, yeah.
And that's as certain as the coal supply down below. But where he's got to buy this time about as uncertain as the trade in crowns in t'other place. God damn!
You see what the problem is?
I see where the problem stands. This is brutal.
All right. You want me to finish that up?
Uh,
I can try to finish it up.
yeah.
The presence of a divinity student was no barrier to his language at such a time. Well, it's a barrier to mine. Though,
Yeah.
for the reader's sake, it may be severely edited. That's edited? What
Oh
is
my god.
what was he saying before? I propose, he added, that we start out at once a hunt for 'em like hell.
I bet he's got the fucking thickest,
There's
unreadable accent.
got it. That's
Yeah.
hilarious. It's gotta be.
Yeah. The gloom of Defago's probable fate oppressed the whole party with a sense of dreadful gravity. The moment they saw the familiar signs of recent occupancy, especially the tent, with the bed of balsam branches still smothered and flattened by the pressure of his body, seemed to bring his presence near to them. Simpson, feeling vaguely as if his world were somehow at stake, went about explaining particulars in a hushed tone. He was much calmer now, though overwearied with the strain of his many journeys. His uncle's method of explaining away, rather, the details still fresh in his haunted memory helped, too, to put ice upon his emotions.
And that's the direction he ran off in, he said to his two companions, pointing in the direction where the guide had vanished that morning in the gray dawn. Straight down there he ran like a deer, in between the birch and the hemlock. Hank and Dr. Cathcart exchanged glances.
And
And,
it was about 2 miles. Oh,
no,
hold on.
you can do that one. I'll do the next one. It's fine.
Okay. And it was about 2 miles down there, in a straight line, continued the other, speaking with something of the former terror in his voice. That I followed his trail to the place where it stopped, dead.
And where you heard him calling, I caught the stench, and all the rest of the wicked entertainment, cried Hank, with a volubility that betrayed his keen distress. Can you hear my dogs right now?
Yeah, I can. It should be fine.
Okay.
I love how Hank talks, though.
Yeah.
And where your excitement overcame you to the point of producing illusions, added Dr. Cathcart under his breath, yet not so low that his nephew did not hear it.
Uh. Okay. It was early in the afternoon, for they had traveled quickly, and there were still a good 2 hours of daylight left. Dr. Cathcart and Hank lost no time in the beginning the search, but Simpson was too exhausted to accompany them. They would follow the blazed marks on the trees, and where possible, his footsteps. Meanwhile, the best thing he could do was to keep a good fire going and rest.
Or he's gonna get molested by the Wendigo. It's gonna happen. Yeah. But after something like 3 hours' search, the darkness already down, the two men returned to camp with nothing to report. Fresh snow had covered all signs. Okay, so you're right.
Mm-hmm.
And though they had followed the blazed trees to the spot where Simpson had turned back, they had not discovered the smallest indication of a human being, or, for that matter, of an animal. There were no fresh tracks of any kind. The snow lay undisturbed.
It was difficult to know what was the best to do, though in reality there was nothing more they could do. They might stay and search for weeks without much chance of success. The fresh snow destroyed their only hope, and they gathered around the fire for supper. A gloomy and despondent party. The facts indeed were sad enough for Defago. Had a wife at Rat Portage, and his earnings were the family's sole meaning of support. Oh
Damn.
no.
Yeah! Now that the whole truth in all its ugliness was out, it seemed useless to deal in further disguise or pretense. They talked openly of the facts and probabilities. It was not the first time, even in the experience of Dr. Cathcart, that a man had yielded to the singular seduction of the solitudes and gone out of his mind. Defago, moreover, was predisposed to something of the sort, for he had already had a touch of the tism, of melancholia in his blood, and his fibre was weakened by bouts of drinking that often lasted for weeks at a time. Something on this trip, one might never know precisely what, had sufficed to push him over the line. That was all. And he had gone off into the great wilderness of trees and lakes to die by starvation and exhaustion. The chances against his finding camp again were overwhelming. The delirium that was upon him, god damn, I'm struggling, would also doubtless have increased,
You want me to
and it
take
was
over?
quite like, nah, I got this.
Okay.
And it was quite likely he might do violence to himself, and so hasten his cruel fate. Even while they talked, indeed, the end had probably come. On the suggestion of Hank, his old pal, however, they proposed to wait a little longer and devote the whole of the following day, from dawn to darkness, to the most systematic search they could devise. They would divide the territory between them. They discussed their plan in great detail. All that men could do they would do. And meanwhile they talked about the particular form in which the singular panic of the wilderness had made its attack upon the mind of the unfortunate guide. Hank, though familiar with the legend in its general outline, obviously did not welcome the turn the conversation had taken. He contributed little, though that little was illuminating, for he admitted that a story ran over all this section of country to the effect that several Indians had seen the Wendigo along the shores of 50 Island Water in the fall of last year, and that this was the true reason of Defago's disinclination to hunt there. Hank Hank doubtless felt that he had in a sense helped his old pal to death by over persuading him. When an Indian goes crazy, he explained, talking to himself more than the others, it seemed, it's always put that he's seen the Wendigo. And poor old Defago was superstitious down to his very heels. God
Damn, you're
damn,
struggling today, bro.
I am, bro. Fucking.
You gotta get like a hot drink. I always drink a hot drink when we're
I
doing
got a
this.
cold drink. Hold on, I got me. I'm better now. I'm warmed up.
Alright. And then Simpson, feeling the atmosphere more sympathetic, told over again the full story of his astonishing tale. He left out no details this time. He mentioned his own sensations and gripping fears. He only omitted the strange language used. I'll do this one. I'll give you a second.
Okay.
But Defago surely had already told you all these details of the Wendigo legend, my dear fellow, insisted the doctor. I mean, he had talked about it, and thus put into your mind the ideas which your own excitement afterwards developed. So does excitement mean something else in these?
Like, so he's razzled. He's dead. Like
Yeah, that's what.
he's, he's excited by like, I don't know, his nerves are excited. Like he's on edge. He's like freaked the fuck out.
Yeah, but that's usually not how we use excitement now, is it?
Well, it's the older writing.
Yeah, I know. It's just I've never seen it used in like that kind of form.
Yeah, it's. I guess in, like today, it's like, oh, that kid's like excited. He's cracked out on sugar, or like stuff like that. Or
Yeah.
there's a few other ways.
Whereupon Simpson again repeated the facts. Defago, he declared, had barely mentioned the beast. He, Simpson, knew nothing of the story, and so far as he remembered, had never even read about it. Even the word was unfamiliar.
Yeah, I'll read this. Of course, he was telling the truth, and Dr. Cathcart was reluctantly compelled to admit the singular character of the whole affair. He did not do this in words, so much as in manner. However, he kept his back against a good, stout tree. He poked the fire into a blaze the moment it showed signs of dying down. He was quicker than any of them to notice the least sound in the night about them. A fish jumping in the lake, a twig snapping in the bush, the dropping of occasional fragments of frozen snow from the branches overhead, where the heat loosened them. His voice, too, changed a little in quality, becoming a shade less confident, lower also in tone. Fear, to put it plainly, hovered close about that little camp, and though all three would have been glad to speak of other matters, the only thing they seemed able to discuss was this, the source of their fear. They tried other subjects in vain. There was nothing to say about them. Hank was most honest of the group. He said next to nothing. He never once, however, turned his back to the darkness. His face was always to the forest, and when wood was needed, he didn't go further than necessary to get it.
A wall of silence wrapped them in for the snow. Huh?
A wall of silence wrapped them in, for the snow, though not thick, was sufficient to deaden any noise.
Well, you might as well keep going now. I'll read the next one.
Damn, okay. And the and the frost held things pretty tight besides. No sound but their voices and the soft roar of the flames made itself heard. Only, from time to time, something soft as the flutter of a pine moth's wings went past them through the air. No one seemed anxious to go to bed. The hours slipped towards midnight.
The legend is picturesque enough to observe the doctor after one of the longer pauses, speaking to break it rather than because he had anything to say, for the Wendigo is simply the call of the wild personified, which some natures hear their own destruction. And that's about it, Hank said presently, and there's no misunderstanding. When you hear it, it calls you by name, right? No?
Right enough.
Right
Right
enough?
enough.
Right enough.
Yeah.
Another pause followed. Then Dr. Cathcart came back to the forbidden subject with a rush that made the others jump.
The allegory is significant, he remarked, looking about him into the darkness. For the voice, they say, resembles all the minor sounds of the bush wind, falling water, cries of the animals, and so forth. And once the victims hear that, he's off for good. Of course, his most vulnerable points, moreover, are said to be the feet and eyes. The feet, you see, for the lust of wandering, and the eyes for the lust of beauty. The poor beggar goes at such a dreadful speed that he bleeds beneath his eyes, and his feet burn. Dr. Cathcart, as he spoke.
Oh,
Huh?
sorry, keep going.
I'll read this.
Yeah.
Dr. Cathcart, as he spoke, continued to peer uneasily into the surrounding gloom. His voice sank to a hushed tone.
You're just gonna see these fucking guys just like jumping at it and chewing at his fucking paws. It's just chewing at his little antler feet or hoof.
They're gonna beat him up, bro. Yeah,
Go for the feet!
fuck him up.
The Wendigo. That's where I'm at, right?
Yep.
The Wendigo, he added, is said to burn his feet, owing to the friction apparently caused by its tremendous velocity till they drop off and new ones form exactly like its own. Simpson listened in a horrified amazement, but it was the pallor. Pallor?
Pallor, I think, yeah.
But it was the pallor on Hank's face that fascinated him most. He would willingly have stopped his ears as closed his eyes had he dared. Jesus.
It don't always keep to the ground neither, came in Hank's slow, heavy drawl, for it goes so high that he thinks the stars have set him all afire, and it'll take great thumping jumps sometimes, and run along the tops of the trees, carrying its partner with it, and then dropping him just as a fish hawk'll drop a pickerel to kill it before eating. And its food, all of the muck in the whole bush is moss. And he laughed a short, unnatural laugh. It's a moss eater, is the Wendigo, he added, looking up excitedly into the faces of his companions. Moss eater, he repeated, with a string of the most outlandish oaths he could invent.
But Simpson now understood the true purpose of all this talk. What these two men, each strong and experienced in his own way, dreaded more than anything else was silence. They were talking against time. They were also talking against darkness, against the invasion of panic, against the admission reflection might bring that they were in enemy's country, against anything, in fact, rather than allow their inmost thoughts to assume control. He himself, already initiated by the awful vigil with terror, was beyond both of them in the respect he had reached the stage where he was immune. But these two, the scoffing and analytical doctor, and the honest, dogged backwoodsmen. Each sat trembling in the depths of his being.
Damn. Thus the hours passed, and thus, with lowered voices and a kind of taut inner resistance of spirit, this little group of humanity sat in the jaws of the wilderness and talked foolishly of the terrible and haunting legend. It was an unequal contest, all things considered, for the wilderness had already the advantage of first attack, and of a hostage. The fate of their comrade hung over them with a steadily increasing weight of oppression that finally became insupportable.
It was Hank, after a pause longer than the preceding ones, that no one seemed able to break, who first let loose all this pent up emotion in very unexpected fashion, by springing suddenly to his feet and letting out the most ear shattering yell imaginable into the night. He could not contain himself any longer, it seemed. To make it carry even beyond an ordinary cry, he interrupted its rhythm by shaking the palm of his hand before his mouth. I don't. I know what you're thinking.
That's I want to do it. That's for the Fago, he said, looking down at the. That's so fucked up. That's for the Fago, he said, looking down at the other two with a queer, defiant laugh. For it's my belief, the sandwiched oaths may be omitted, that my old partner is not far from us this very minute.
There was a venomous and recklessness about his performance that made Simpson to start to his feet in amazement, and betrayed even the doctor into letting the pipe slip from between his lips. Hang on. Hank's face was ghastly, but Cathcart showed a sudden weakness, a loosening of all his faculties.
Yeah.
As it were, then a momentary anger blazed into his eyes, and he too, though with deliberation born a habitual self control, got upon his feet and faced the excited guide, for this was unpermissible, foolish, dangerous, and he meant to stop it in the bud.
What might have happened in the next minute or two, uh, one may speculate about, yet never definitely know. For in the instant of profound silence that followed Hank's roaring voice, and as though in answer to it, something went past through the darkness of the sky overhead at terrific speed. Something of a necessity very large, for it displaced much air. Well, down between the trees there fell a faint and windy cry of a human voice, calling in tones of indescribable anguish and appeal.
Oh, oh, this fiery height. Oh, oh, my feet of fire. My burning feet of fire.
White to the very edge of his shirt, Hank looked stupidly about him like a child. Dr. Cathcart uttered some kind of unintelligible cry, turning as he did so with an instinctive moment of blind terror towards the protection of the tent. Then, halting in the act as though frozen, Simpson alone of the three retained his presence of mind a little. His own horror was too deep to allow of any immediate reaction. He had heard that cry before. Turning to his stricken companions, he said almost calmly,
That's exactly the cry I heard. The very words he used.
then actually you get this.
Then, lifting his face to the sky, he cried aloud, Defago! Defago! Come down here to us! Come down! And before there was time for anybody to take definite action, one way or another, there came the sound of something dropping heavily between the trees, striking the branches on the way down and landing with a dreadful thud upon the frozen earth below. The crash and thunder of it was really terrific.
That's
That's
him.
oh,
That's him. She'll help. So what? So help me, the good God, came from Hank in a whispering cry, half choked, his hand going automatically toward the hunting knife in his belt. And he's coming! He's coming! He added, with an irrational laugh of horror, as the sounds of heavy footsteps crunching over the snow became distinctly audible, approaching through the blackness towards the circle of light.
And while the steps with their stumbling motion moved nearer and nearer upon them, the three men stood around that fire, motionless and dumb. Dr. Cathcart had the appearance of a man suddenly withered. Even his eyes did not move. Hank, suffering shockingly, seemed on the verge again of violent action, yet did nothing. He, too, was hewn of stone. Like stricken children, they seemed the picture was hideous. And meanwhile their owner still invisible, the footsteps came closer, crunching the frozen snow. It was endless, too prolonged to be quite real. This measured and pitilessness approached, it was accursed.
You know. Then, at length, the darkness, having thus laboriously conceived, brought forth a figure. It drew forward into the zone of uncertain light, where fire and shadows mingled, not 10 feet away, then halted, staring at them fixedly. The same instant it started forward again, with a spasmodic motion, as of a thing moved by wires, and coming up closer to them, full into the glare of the fire, they perceived then that it was a man, and apparently that this man was Defago.
Something like a skin of horror almost perceptibly drew down in the moment over every face, and three pairs of eyes shone through it, as though they saw across the frontiers of normal vision into the unknown.
Defago advanced, his tread faltering and uncertain. He made his way straight up to them as a group first, then turned sharply and peered close into the face of Simpson. The sound of a voice issued from his lips.
Here I am, Boss Simpson. I heard someone calling me. It was faint, dried up voice, made wheezing and breathless as by immense exertion. I'm having a regular hellfire kind of trip, I am. And he laughed, thrusting his head forward into the other's face.
But that laugh started the machinery of the group of waxwork figures, with the wax white skins. Hank immediately sprang forward with a stream of oaths so far-fetched that Simpson did not recognize them as English at all, but but thought he had lapsed into Indian or some other lingo. He only realized that Hank's presence, thrust thus between them, was welcome, uncommonly welcome. Dr. Cathcart, though more calmly and leisurely, advanced behind him, heavily stumbling.
Simpson seems hazy as to what was actually said and done in those next few seconds, for the eyes of that
Detestable.
detestable, of that
Yes.
detestable and blasted visage peering at such close quarters into their own utterly bewildered his senses. At first, he merely stood still. He said nothing. He had not the trained will of the older man that forced them into action in defiance of all emotional distress. He watched them moving as behind a glass and half destroyed their reality. It was dreamlike, perverted, yet through the torrent of Hank's meaningless phrases he remembers hearing his uncle's tone of authority, hard and forced, saying several things about food and warmth and blankets, whiskey, and the rest. And further, that whiffs of that penetrating, unaccustomed odor, vile yet sweetly bewildering, assailed his nostrils during all that followed.
It was no less a person than himself, however, less experienced and adroit than the others though he was, who gave instinctive utterance to the sentence that brought a measure of relief into the ghastly situation by expressing the doubt and thought in each one's heart. "It is you, isn't it, Defago?" he asked under his voice, horror breaking his speech.
And at once Cathcart burst out with a loud answer before the other had time to move his lips. Of course it is. Of course it is. Only, can't you see? He's nearly dead with exhaustion, cold, and terror. Isn't that enough to change a man beyond all recognition? It was said in order to convince himself as much as to convince the others. God damn it.
Got
Shouldn't have ate that Subway, bro. I'm struggling.
damn.
The other phases alone prevented that, and continually while he spoke and acted, he held a handkerchief to his nose. The odor pervaded the whole camp.
For the Defago, who sat huddled by the big fire, wrapped in blankets, drinking hot whiskey and holding food in wasted hands, was no more like the guide they had last seen alive than the picture of a man of 60 is like a oh god daguerreotype. Is that like stereotype but old?
I'm assuming.
Meaning a photograph taken by an early photographic process. Oh, okay, I know what this
The
is.
Garrotype.
Uh, the man of a the picture of a man of 60 is like a daguerreotype of his early youth in the costume of another generation. Nothing really can describe that ghastly caricature, that parody, masquerading there in the firelight as Defago. From the ruins of the dark and awful memories he still retains, Simpson declares that the face was more animal than human, the features drawn about into wrong proportions, the skin loose and hanging, as though he had been subjected to extraordinary pressures and tensions, and made him think vaguely of those bladder faces blown up by the hawkers on Ludgate Hill, that change their expressions as they swell and as they collapse, emit a faint and wailing imitation of a voice. Both face and voice suggested some such abominable resemblance, but Cathcart long afterwards, seeking to describe the indescribable, asserts that this might have looked a face and body that had been in air so rarefied that the weight of atmosphere being removed, the entire structure threatened to fly asunder and become incoherent. That was brutal.
Yeah. It was Hank, though all distraught and shaking with a tearing volume of emotion. He could neither handle nor understand who brought things to heed without much ado. He went off to a little distance from the fire, apparently so that the light should not dazzle him too much, and shading his eyes for a moment with both hands shouted in a loud voice that held anger and affection dreadfully mingled.
You ain't Defago. You ain't Defago at all. I don't give a damn. But that ain't you, my old pal of 20 years. He glared upon the huddled figure as though he would destroy him with his eyes. And if it is, I'll swab the floor of hell with a wad of cotton wool and a toothpick. Shelp me the good God. He added with a violent fling of horror and disgust.
It was impossible to silence him. He stood there, shouting like one possessed, horrible to see, horrible to hear, because it was the truth. He repeated himself in 50 different ways, each more outlandish than the last. The woods rang with echoes. At one time it looked as if he meant to fling himself upon the intruder, for his hand continually jerked towards the long hunting knife in his belt.
But in the end he did nothing, and the whole tempest completed itself very shortly with tears. Hank's voice suddenly broke. He collapsed on the ground, and Cathcart somehow or other persuaded him at last to go into the tent and lie quiet. The remainder of the affair indeed was witnessed by him from behind the canvas, his white and terrified face peeping through the crack of the tent door flap.
Then Dr. Cathcart, closely followed by his nephew, who so far had kept his courage better than all of them, went up with a determined air and stood opposite to the figure of Defago, huddled over the fire. He looked him squarely in the face and spoke. At first, his voice was firm.
Fago, tell us what happened, just a little, so we can know how best to help you. He asked in a tone of authority, almost of command, and at that point it was command. At once afterwards, however, it changed in quality, for the figure turned up to him, a face so piteous, so terrible, and so little like humanity that the doctor shrank back from him as from something spiritually unclean. Simpson, watching close behind him, says he got the impression of a mask that was on the verge of dropping off, and that underneath they would discover something black and diabolical, revealed in utter nakedness. "Out with it, man! Out with it!" Cathcart cried, terror running neck and neck with entreaty. None of us can stand this much longer. It was the cry of instinct over reason.
And then Defago, smiling whitely, answered in that thin and fading voice that already seemed passing over into sound of quiet, another character. "I seen that great Wendigo thing," he whispered, sniffing the air about him exactly like an animal. "I been with it too."
Whether the poor devil would have said more, or whether Dr. Cathcart would have continued the impossible cross-examination, cannot be known. For at that moment the voice of Hank was heard yelling at the top of his voice from behind the canvas that concealed all but his terrified eyes. Such a howling was never heard. "His feet! Oh God, his feet! Look at his great changed feet!"
Bro, you gotta work on your character
His
voice.
feet! Oh God, his feet! Look at his great changed feet!
There you go. Defago, shuffling where he sat, had moved in such a way that for the first time his legs were in the full light, and his feet were visible. Yet Simpson had no time himself to see properly what Hank had seen, and Hank has never seen fit to tell. That same instant, with a leap like that of a frightened tiger, Cathcart was upon him, bundling the folds of blanket about his legs with such speed that the young student caught a little more than a passing glimpse of something dark and oddly masked where what does that say?
Moccasined.
Where moccasined feet ought to have been, and saw even but with uncertain vision.
Then, before the doctor had time to do more, or Simpson time to even think a question, much less ask it, Fago was standing upright in front of them, balancing with pain and difficulty, and upon his shapeless and twisted visage an expression so dark and so malicious that it was, in the true sense, monstrous. "Now, you seen it too," he wheezed. "You seen my fiery, burning feet, and now, that is, unless you kin save me and prevent, it's about time for."
Bruh.
He gets cut off, bro.
Now you see it too, he
"My burning
wheezed.
feet."
You've seen my fiery, burning feet, and now, that is, unless you can save me and prevent, it's about time for.
His piteous and beseeching voice was interrupted by a sound that was like the roar of wind coming across the lake. The trees overhead shook their tangled branches. The blazing fire bent its flames as before a blast, and something swept with a terrific rushing noise about the little camp, and seemed to surround it entirely in a single moment of time. Defago shook the clinging blankets from his body, turned towards the woods behind, and with the same stumbling motion that had brought him, was gone. Gone before anyone could move muscle to prevent him. Gone with an amazing, blundering swiftness that left no time to act. The darkness positively swallowed him, and less than a dozen seconds later, above the roar of the swaying trees and the shout of the sudden wind, all three men, watching and listening with stricken hearts, heard a cry that seemed to drop down upon them from a great height of sky and distance.
Oh, oh, this fiery height. Oh, oh, my feet of fire. My burning feet of fire. Then died away into untold space and silence.
Right. it just sounds like he's like a gay wizard guy. He's chanting, or maybe like a homo druid. Oh,
Mode.
oh, this fiery height. Oh, oh, my feet of fire. My burning feet of fire. It's
Yeah,
like,
like honest, I, I
I kind of
I
understand. Like,
understand, but it does kind of take me out of it. Like,
yeah, it's
yeah,
silly.
it's kind of dumb. Like,
Yeah,
he could have definitely written like something better than that.
yeah. Like, I couldn't think of anything
I
right
don't
now, but
know,
like,
but like he definitely could have. Like,
yeah,
there's
yeah.
it's
Doctor Cathcart, suddenly master of himself and therefore of the others, was just able to seize Hank violently by the arm as he tried to dash headlong into the bush.
but I want to know. No, this is you, bro.
But I want ter know, you, shrieked the guide. I want ter see. That ain't him at all, but some devil that's shunted into his place.
Somehow or other, he admits he never quite knew how he accomplished it. He managed to keep him in the tent and pacify him. The doctor apparently had reached Jesus. Had reached the stage where reaction had set in and allowed his own innate force to conquer. Certainly he managed, Hank, admirably. It was his nephew. However, what the fuck?
Hitherto,
Oh, hitherto so wonderfully controlled, who gave him most causes for anxiety for the
humanative,
circumulative strain, now produced a condition of. I'm not even gonna try. I'm not even gonna try.
lachrymose,
I'm not. of,
hysteria.
of lachrymose hysteria, which
I
made
don't
it
even say that.
necessary to isolate him upon a bed of Jesus,
Pose.
my brain, bro.
Yeah,
Bows and blankets as far removed from Hank as was possible under the circumstances.
you're struggling.
I
We're
should
both
that I
struggling
was struggling
today.
with that one. That one was bad.
Yeah. And there he lay as the watches of that haunted night passed over the lonely camp, crying startled sentences and fragments of sentences into the folds of his blanket. A quantity of gibberish about speed and height and fire mingled oddly with biblical memories of the classroom. People with broken faces, all on fire, are coming at a most awful, awful pace towards the camp. He would moan one minute, and the next would sit up and stare into the woods, intently listening, and whisper, "How terrible in the wilderness are the feet of them that," until his uncle came across to change the direction of his thoughts and comfort him. The hysteria fortunately proved but temporary. Sleep cured him, just as it cured Hank.
Still, the first signs of daylight came soon after 5 o'clock. Dr. Cathcart kept his vigil. His face was the color of chalk, and there were very strange flushes beneath the eyes. An appalling terror of soul battle with his will, all, all through those silent hours. These were some of the outer
Okay.
signs. At
At
dawn, he lit the fire himself made breakfast. Oh, hang on. At dawn,
you know,
he lit the fire himself, made breakfast, and woke the others. And by 7, they were well on their way back to the home camp. 3 perplexed and afflicted men, but each in his own way having reduced his inner turmoil to a condition of more or less symptomized order again.
systematized. Yeah,
Systematized?
systemized.
Systemized?
Systematized. Huh. They talked little, and then only of the most wholesome and common things, for their minds were charged with painful thoughts that clamored for explanation, though no one dared refer to them. Hank, being nearest to primitive conditions, was the first to find himself, for he was also less complex. In Dr. Cathcart, civilization championed his forces against an attack singular enough to this day. Perhaps he is not quite sure of certain things. Anyhow, he took longer to find himself.
Simpson, the student of divinity, it was who arranged his conclusions probably with the best, though not most scientific appearance of order, out there in the heart of the unreclaimed wilderness. They had surely witnessed something cruelly and essentially primitive, something that had survived somehow. The advanced of humanity had emerged terrifically, betraying a scale of life still monstrous and immature. He in,
And
in,
envisaged.
envisaged it rather as a glimpse into prehistoric ages, when superstitions, gigantic and unclothed, still oppressed the hearts of men. When the forces, oh my god, when the forces of nature were still untamed, the powers that may have haunted a primeval universe, not yet withdrawn. To this day, he thinks of what termed years later in a sermon. Savage and formidable potencies lurking beyond the souls of men. Not evil, perhaps, themselves, yet instinctively hostile to humanity as it exists.
With his uncle, he never discussed the matter in detail, for the barrier between the two types of mind made it difficult. Only once, years later, something led them to the frontier of the subject, of a single detail. I just lost it. A single detail of the subject. Rather,
Can't you even tell me what they were like? He
he
asked.
asked,
And
and
I know you do that. You got that. You got that.
and the reply, though conceived in wisdom, was not encouraging.
It is far better you should not try to know or to find out. Well, that odor.
Persisted the nephew.
What do you make of that?
Dr. Cathcart looked at him and raised his eyebrows.
Odors
He replied,
are not so easy as sounds and sights of telepathic communication. I make as much, or little, probably you do yourself.
he was not quite so glib. Okay, I gotta know what glib means. Come on now. Glib.
Glib.
Glib. Of words or the person speaking them, fluent and voluble, but insincere and shallow. Uh, she was careful not to let the answer sound too glib. What? Of words or the person speaking, fluent and voluble, but insincere. Oh, so it's like not very truthful and like empty words.
Hmm.
At the fall of day, cold, exhausted, famished, the party came to the end of the long portage and dragged themselves into a camp that at first glimpse seemed empty. Fire there was none, and no punk came forward to welcome them. The emotional capacity of all three was too overspent to recognize either surprise or annoyance, but the cry of spontaneous affection that burst from the lips of Hank, as he rushed ahead of them towards the fireplace, came probably as a warning that the end of the amazing affair was not quite yet. And both Cathcart and his nephew confessed afterwards that when they saw him kneel down in excitement and embrace something that reclined, gently moving beside the extinguished ashes, they felt in their very bones that this something would prove to be Defago. The true Defago returned. And so indeed it was.
It is soon told, exhausted to the point of
Macy.
emaciation, the French Canadian, what was left of him, that is fumbled among the ashes, trying to make a fire. His body crouched there, the weak fingers obeying feebly the instinctive habit of a lifetime with twigs and matches. There was no longer any mind to direct the simple operation. The mind had fled beyond recall, and with it, too, had fled memory. Not only recent events, but all previous life was a blank.
This time it was the real man, though incredibly and horribly shrunken. On his face was no expression of any kind whatsoever. Fear, welcome, or recognition. He did not seem to know who it was that embraced him, or who it was that fed, warmed, and spoke to him the words of comfort and relief. Forlorn and broken beyond all reach of human aid, the little man did meekly as he was bidden. The something that had constituted him individual had vanished forever.
In some ways, it was more terribly moving than anything they had yet seen. That idiot's smile as he drew waves of coarse moss from his swollen cheeks and told them that he was a damned moss eater. The continued vomiting of even the simplest food, and the worst of all, the the piteous,
Idiot. Yep.
piteous, the piteous and childish voice of compliment, in which he told them that excuse me,
Complaint.
voice of complaint, in
Yeah.
which he told them that his feet pained him, burned like fire, which was the natural enough when Dr. Cathcart examined them and found that both were dreadfully frozen. Beneath the eyes there were faint indications of recent bleeding.
The details of how he survived the prolonged exposure, of where he had been, or of how he covered the great distance from one camp to the other, including an immense detour of the lake on foot since he had no canoe. All this remains unknown. His memory had vanished completely, and before the end of the winter, whose beginning witnessed this strange occurrence, Defago, bereft of mind, memory, and soul, had gone with it. He lingered only a few weeks.
And what Punk was able to contribute to the story throws no further light upon it. He was cleaning fish by the lake shore about 5 o'clock in the evening, an hour that is before the search party returned, when he saw this shadow of the guide picking its way weakly into the camp. In advance of him, he declares, came the faint whiff of a certain singular odor.
That same instant, old Punk started for home. He covered the entire journey of 3 days as only Indian blood could have covered it. The terror of a whole race drove him. He knew what it all meant. Defago had seen the Wendigo. End of the Project Gutenberg ebook 10897.
All
That
right. Well,
was pretty sick.
yeah. How do you feel about the ending of that though?
I was kind of hoping the Wendigo was gonna be a creature that would absolutely fuck shit up, not kind of be like I'm gonna use this guy's body and fuck around and then
Yeah, it
let him go.
felt he felt like
It
a
was cool.
non yeah, but he felt like a non-threat. You know what I mean? Like he
Yeah,
didn't feel like an
I,
actual
I
threat.
I feel like that. I feel like this is very based off the actual Wendigo
Yeah,
like
probably.
myth,
Yeah.
and I'm assuming it's just because they like I'm pretty sure they run around all crazy like because they thought they turned into a Wendigo, and he just I'm assuming he just lost his mind.
Yeah, so that thing in the camp was the Wendigo, right?
Yes, because he like when I imagined like when he came because he said he like whoosh like through the air like of big mass right into the top of a tree kind of and like he slumped down and like bang hit the ground like I imagined that was the Wendigo in his body like I'm assuming it's like a spirit like a forest spirit just took over his body.
Yeah, that's kind of what I was thinking too. But like usually like depictions of Wendigos are more like creature-esque. Modern
Yeah.
ones
Let me
anyways.
actually what does this say? What the hell? A mythological creature from the Algonquin folklore. That's Canada, isn't it?
Yeah.
Often described as malevolent, cannibalistic spirit. Okay, it's a spirit associated with winter, famine, and greed. Okay,
Yeah, but there was no cannibalism in the story.
that's true. He didn't eat any of his buddies. I mean, that we know of. He could have snacked on somebody.
I don't know. I think that was kind of like I don't know. I'm kind of underwhelmed right now. I wanted much
That's
more
fair.
for like
Yeah,
for how much we read and like how much build up there was. Like there
it was just a very
it was
disappointing
very
drop off.
disappointing. Yeah, like and I feel like he put so much into the writing that like once we got there like it felt
It was
wasteful. It felt wasteful.
yeah.
Because I know for a fact that he could have made a crazy like monster description or made something
Could
cool,
have.
and like the
Yeah,
story could have been way scarier. Like it just really wasn't. It had some moments were a little like creepy, but
it was really cool and like somewhat
yeah,
spooky.
I'm not saying it's not
But
bad. It's just definitely not
no, it's
what
it's good. It's
I
just
would have
what you
liked.
expect.
Yeah, or expected.
Yeah, it's fair.
All right, well, I think it's a good place to call it. We'll be back with something else soon.
We'll find something.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.